For nearly 4 decades, the Caterpillar 790D3 was the haul truck that Canadian mining ran on. From the Alberta oil sands to the Ontario nickel belt, from the copper pits of British Columbia to the gold operations north of Sudbury, if your mine moved more than 200,000 tons of overburden a day, you ran Cat trucks. That was the rule. Canada's minerals and metals sector now contributes roughly $156 billion to national GDP. About $22.2 billion of that gets spent every single year on mining machinery and equipment alone. 138 major mining projects are queued up across the country, with roughly $117 billion in planned capital expenditure over the next decade. And in mine after mine, when contracts came up for renewal, the iron rolling onto the new ground was no longer painted yellow. It was painted Komatsu blue, Liebherr white, Volvo orange. The reason has nothing to do with the trucks themselves, and everything to do with decisions made in boardrooms thousands of kilometers south of the mine sites. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. We document the corporate decisions inside boardrooms in Peoria, Chicago, and Irving, Texas, that hollowed out one of the most respected industrial brands of the 20th century. The data tells the story. To understand what changed in Canadian mining, you have to understand what the standard used to be. Through the 1980s and the 1990s, Caterpillar was the equipment standard for Canadian mining for the same reason. It was the standard everywhere. The dealer network. The parts availability. The Finning International dealership that covered British Columbia, Alberta, the Yukon, and a chunk of the Northwest Territories, plus its sister network through the rest of the country. When a mine in Fort McMurray called for a part at 3 a.m. during -40 wind chill, Finning answered. That responsiveness was the moat. The trucks themselves were good. The 793F was a workhorse. The 797F was the ultra-class king. The dozers were the dozers. The graders were the graders. Canadian mine planners spec'd Cat the way American operations did because the support and the parts logistics made any other choice operationally painful. The word Caterpillar meant mining truck in Canadian operator vocabulary, the same way the word caterpillar meant bagger in German construction vocabulary. That dominance ran on a specific business model. Cat sold the iron, then sold the parts, then sold the service contracts, then sold the financing, then sold the leasing arrangements, then sold the resale platform when the operation traded up. Every dollar of revenue per machine over a 15-year asset life ran back to Caterpillar in some form. As long as the dealer network stayed responsive and the technology kept pace with what the mines needed, the model was unbreakable. The trouble started when the technology stopped keeping pace and when the corporate decisions started to be made by people whose job was not engineering mining equipment. Here is the corporate timeline that matters. Caterpillar's headquarters sat in Peoria, Illinois, from the company's founding until the year 2017. Peoria was the factory town. The engineers lived there, the product testing happened there, the dealer training happened there. The institutional memory of how mining haul trucks actually got designed and serviced sat inside a 100-mile radius. In 2017, Caterpillar moved its corporate headquarters out of Peoria to the Chicago area into the Deerfield corridor. 5 years later, in June 2022, the company announced it was relocating again, this time to Irving, Texas. The reasons given were the usual corporate language about access to global talent, proximity to financial markets, tax efficiency. The reasons not stated in the press release were Harvard Business School, orthodoxy, shareholder primacy, and a thesis that the company should be run by financial executives optimizing for quarterly returns, not by engineering executives optimizing for 15-year fleet uptime. The MBA suits won the internal argument, the pencil pushers won, the bean counters won. And the engineering culture that had defined Cat for the better part of a century started to drain out of the company. You can see the consequence in the patents. You can see it in the R&D spend as a percentage of revenue. You can see it in the executive compensation tied to buyback ratios. You can see it in the dealer consolidation pressure, where regional dealers were pushed to merge into larger entities with bigger balance sheets and thinner local presence. You can see it in the customer value agreements, the Cat Connect subscriptions, the firmware-locked diagnostic tools, the captive market business model that started to feel less like a partnership and more like a tax. And then you can see it in what Caterpillar did not do during the decade when the rest of the mining equipment industry was reinventing itself. While CAT's executives were renegotiating their relocation packages and managing shareholder communications about the Texas move, three things were happening in the parts of the world that build mining haul trucks. The first was the rise of autonomous haulage, led almost entirely by a Japanese competitor that most Canadian audiences underestimate. Komatsu launched its Frontrunner autonomous haulage system commercially in 2008. It was the first commercially deployed autonomous truck system in the mining industry. By April 2026, Komatsu commissioned its 1,000th autonomous haul truck. More than 500 of those 1,000 trucks are Komatsu 930E units. Frontrunner has been deployed in Australia, in Chile, in the United States, and across multiple Canadian operations. While CAT's MineStar command system exists and works, CAT lost the first mover position from 2008 onward. By the time CAT's autonomy story matured, Komatsu had a 15-year head start in production deployment, operator training, fleet management software, and the institutional muscle of solving the problems autonomy actually creates in cold weather mining environments. Canadian mine operators noticed the mines that needed autonomy spexed Komatsu because Komatsu had a decade and a half of running cycles in the dataset. The second thing was the rise of European drilling specialists. Mining is not just haulage. The blast hole drilling, the underground production drilling, the surface rotary drilling, all of that runs on rigs. And in Canada, in operation after operation, the rigs are increasingly Swedish. Sandvik and Epiroc, both Swedish, together hold a dominant position in mining drilling worldwide. Epiroc's Pit Viper line of rotary blast hole drills is the workhorse of large copper and gold operations on multiple continents. In Canada, you see Pit Viper rigs at major copper porphyry operations, at iron ore sites, at oil sands ancillary support. Caterpillar exited or deprioritized most of the underground hard rock drilling's business years ago. The Swedish brands now own that segment in a way that is functionally unrecoverable for any American competitor on the current capex curve. The third thing was the rise of electric and series hybrid drivetrain architectures in ultra-class haulage. The Liebherr T284 runs a diesel-electric drivetrain that converts diesel power into electrical power, which then drives the wheel motors. It is fundamentally a different drivetrain philosophy than the CAT 7987F, which uses a mechanical drivetrain with a torque converter and a transmission. As mining operations push toward decarbonization, lower diesel consumption per ton hauled, and trolley assist infrastructure that runs trucks on grid power along the haul road, the diesel-electric architecture has an inherent advantage. Lever is family-owned, founded in 1949, still entirely controlled by the Lever family. There are no quarterly earnings calls. There is no pressure to cut R&D to fund buybacks. The company spends what it needs to spend on engineering because the family decides what to spend. Canadian mine operators notice that too.
Quick break before we get into what's happened next.
If you're following how Caterpillar lost segment after segment, subscribe so the next one lands in your feed. Now, back to it. So where do things stand in Canadian mining right now? Caterpillar is not gone from Canada. That is the honest version of the story. CAT remains strong in the Alberta oil sands through the Finning International Dealer Network, which has decades of relationship equity with the major oil sands producers. CAT trucks still run at Suncor sites. CAT trucks still run at Syncrude sites. CAT dozers still push overburden in significant numbers. The Finning network keeps responding when the phone rings at 3 in the morning. In that stronghold, CAT is still the default, but move outside the oil sands and look at the broader picture. The nickel operations around Sudbury increasingly run Komatsu and Liebherr in haulage and Sandvik underground. The copper operations in British Columbia spec Epiroc Pit Viper rigs and increasingly choose Komatsu 930E haul trucks for new fleet orders. The gold operations across northern Ontario and Quebec are blended fleets where the share of yellow iron has been dropping with every multi-year capex cycle. Volvo Construction Equipment articulated haulers, the A60H specifically, have taken meaningful share in ancillary mining haulage at Canadian sites where the application fits the articulated platform. Then there is the geographic irony that the Canadian operator audience already knows. The Komatsu 830E ultra-class haul truck, 240 short tons of payload, built in Peoria, Illinois. The Komatsu plant is in Caterpillar's original hometown. Every 830E that rolls off the line in Peoria and gets shipped north to a Canadian mine site is a small monument to what CAT used to be and what CAT decided not to be anymore. Komatsu also acquired Joy Global in 2017, the same year Caterpillar moved its headquarters out of Peoria. Joy Global brought with it the P&H rope shovel line and the Letourneau wheel loader heritage, both of which had deep roots in American mining, and both of which now belong to a Japanese parent. The map of who builds the iron that Canadian mines run on has been redrawn, and the redrawing happened during the years Catafort was managing its real estate footprint. The corporate decision pattern repeats. The headquarters in Peoria gets traded for the headquarters in Chicago in 2017. The headquarters in Chicago gets traded for the headquarters in Irving, Texas in 2022. The R&D budget gets traded for the share buyback. The product engineer who knew the 793F inside out gets traded for the MBA who manages the quarterly investor call. The dealer network gets pressured to consolidate. The captive market business model becomes more captive with more software locks, more subscription tiers, more friction for independent service shops. And every year, a Canadian mine planner, reviewing the total cost of ownership over a 15-year asset life, finds one more reason to put a Komatsu, Liebherr, or Volvo unit at the top of the bid sheet. There is a separate Canadian story playing out underground that compounds the surface haulage story. The Nickel Basin around Sudbury, Ontario, the world's most productive nickel mining district, has been quietly running underground autonomy and electrification programs for over a decade. The Sandvik Automine platform, the Swedish company's underground autonomous loader and truck system, has deployments at several Sudbury Basin operations, including underground gold and nickel mines across the Canadian Shield. The Epiroc Boltec rock bolting rigs, the Sandvik DD422I underground drilling jumbos, the Atlas Copco legacy machines, now under Epiroc ownership, all sit on Canadian underground production faces in numbers that Caterpillar's underground line cannot match. The CAT underground mining product line exists, but it has never had the engineering depth or the customer base mass that the Swedish underground specialists built over 30 years of focused investment. When a Canadian nickel operation specifies a new underground autonomous loader haul dump fleet, the bid sheet runs Sandvik against Epiroc, with CAT sometimes appearing as a third option and increasingly not appearing at all. The underground autonomy data favors Sandvik for the same structural reasons the surface haulage autonomy data favors Komatsu: first mover position, deployed fleet scale, accumulated operating data, and a corporate culture that treated underground mining as a core engineering identity rather than one product line among many fighting for internal R&D investment. The hydraulic shovel story in Canadian mining tells the same pattern at a different scale. The Komatsu PC 8000 hydraulic mining shovel is one of the largest hydraulic shovels in production, deployed at major Canadian iron ore and copper operations. The Liebherr R9800 and R9600 hydraulic shovels are also widely deployed in Canadian mining loading applications. The CAT 6000 hydraulic mining shovel was a strong product, but Caterpillar's strategic commitment to the ultra-class hydraulic shovel segment has been uneven, and the company exited or deprioritized parts of the line over the last decade. When a Canadian iron ore operation specifies a new high payloads fleet, the bid runs Komatsu PC 8000 against Liebherr R9800, with CAT appearing in smaller class loading applications rather than at the top of the segment. The CAT dealer network through Finning still services existing legacy CAT shovel fleets and provides parts logistics that competitors cannot easily match, but the new fleet procurement decisions over the last decade increasingly went to Komatsu and Liebherr because that is where the segment leading product investment has been concentrated. The directional shift compounds the surface haulage shift, the drilling shift, and the underground autonomy shift, until the picture of who supplies the ultra-large equipment that defines Canadian mining looks structurally different in 2026 than it looked in 2010. There is also a regulatory and carbon economics dimension that the Canadian operator audience reads in detail. Canada has federal and provincial carbon pricing in place. The cost of diesel per liter at remote mine sites, after carbon pricing and remote fuel logistics premiums, runs at levels that make every percentage point of fuel efficiency a meaningful contributor to operating cost. The diesel-electric drivetrain advantage of the Komatsu 930E and the Lever T284 over the CAT 7987F mechanical drivetrain shows up directly in the carbon pricing accounting. The trolley assist infrastructure that some Canadian operations are studying or deploying is structurally compatible with diesel-electric haul trucks and structurally incompatible with mechanical drive haul trucks. The pathway to mine electrification that Canadian mining is on, driven partly by carbon policy and partly by ESG investor pressure, runs through the Komatsu and Liebherr platforms more easily than through the existing Caterpillar platforms. Every fleet replacement cycle that lands during this electrification transition is another opportunity for the structural advantage of diesel-electric architecture to compound, and the CAT corporate decision-making in Irving, Texas, has not moved fast enough on its own electrification roadmap to close the gap. Caterpillar remains a major global manufacturer. CAT is still the largest player in plenty of segments. The Finning relationship in the Alberta oil sands is real. The CAT presence in Canadian construction equipment is substantial. The point is not that CAT has left Canada. The point is that in mining segment after mining segment, the directional shift over the last decade is unmistakable, and it traces back to decisions made by people whose job was not designing mining trucks. If you've operated heavy machinery in Canada in the last decade, drop the brand and model in the comments, and tell me when you switched away from CAT, if you ever ran one. Let's see how many of us watched this transfer happen in real time, on real job sites, before any boardroom in Texas admitted it was happening. Every operator who switched to Komatsu or Liebherr a decade ago saw this coming long before the boardroom in Texas admitted it. The fuel bills told the story. The dealer responses told the story. The cab quality told the story. The autonomous fleet management dashboards told the story. The 830E units rolling off the line in Peoria on Caterpillar's home turf told the story. The smart professionals read it early. The MBAs are still pretending they didn't. See you in the next one.